Welcome, combatants, to another day in the arena. It's your boy James, aka NeuralNet Games, and today I'm bringing you information on alchemy, and the world is on fire. Reddit is so pissed off. There are threads popping up everywhere on alchemy, and if you don't know what alchemy is, what rock have you been hiding under? It's the biggest thing to happen to Magic the Gathering Arena since its inception, and it is stirring up a ton of controversy. Reddit is so mad. I'm gonna go through some Reddit threads, go over some of the comments, and react to them because I think it'll be fun. And we're also gonna go through exactly what alchemy is and what it means to you. Is it good? Is it bad? And we're going to go through, there's new cards. There's a bunch of new cards where there's a bunch of rebalanced cards. And then I'm going to go through my final thoughts. I think I've got a bit of a hot take on, what this means for you, what this means for MTG Arena and all of us Magic players. And Covert Go Blue, the biggest streamer in the Magic Arena space, he said it's the biggest crossroads he's ever had as a content creator. And that's saying something coming from the biggest streamer in the MTG Arena space. I think most people know who he is. And so there's a lot to unpack here, and we're going to unpack it all. Hopefully you enjoy. And I just want to say this too. I think Wizards of the Coast, they don't want to be another blockbuster. I'll explain more later, and let's get to it. Okay, so for those of you who aren't up to speed on alchemy, I'm just going to quickly go through what alchemy is. So alchemy is a new MTG Arena play mode based on standard that incorporates new to digital Magic alongside rebalanced standard cards to create a fast, ever-evolving experience for the players directly from Wizards of the Coast. What does that actually mean? It means there's a separate play mode, so standard still stays. Standard best of one, unchanged. What they will have though is this alchemy mode where cards are going to be rebalanced about once a month. And we'll talk about that later. I'm going to go through each of the rebalances, but spoiler alert, like Goldspan Dragon is being rebalanced. I'll go through exactly how later on. But what they're going to try and do is they're going to try and keep the meta in a less stale state. So right now, standard, it starts to get a little bit boring for a lot of people after 2-3 weeks, maybe a month the most, after the new set of cards come out, because it gets solved so quickly now, right? I heard this stat, I think in the first week of play when a set comes out, there will be more games played on Magic Arena with that set than there ever will be in the entire world for the rest of time in paper Magic. I think that's what the stat is. So what happens because of that is that things change super fast. The format is solved really quickly. And I think alchemy is an attempt to keep the format fresher. So yeah, like I said, we're going to get rebalances every month in alchemy. So, nerfing and buffing certain cards. There's also some buffs that we're going to talk about. And then also about 4 to 6 weeks after each premier set comes out, they're going to release digital only cards. For this particular one, for Crimson Vow, they are releasing 63 new cards that are digital only. We've got, I think, 10 or 12 of them here. I think 10. And I'll quickly go through them. And I will just say there is some very interesting mechanics, very, very interesting. And it's pretty exciting. New cards are always exciting, but is it all good? Well, you're going to have to wait to find out, because I'm going to go through the good and I'm going to go through the bad. And just so you know, when Alchemy comes out, which is December 9th, when it launches, you can try it. You get 3 alchemy boosters for free. You get 6 rare alchemy individual card rewards. And then you're going to get 1 alchemy mythic rare. Okay. So let's get to the good. So how do you play Alchemy? Well, just like Historic, Alchemy's a digital-only format playable on MTG Arena. You can play it in best of 1 and best of 3, ranked and unranked. So you just go into it like normal standard queue. Booster cost is exactly the same. And then there's also a special bundle that you can buy one time that contains 20 boosters for 3,000 gems or 15,000 gold. So a bit of a discount there. And then how do you actually collect the Alchemy cards? You can purchase Alchemy boosters from the store, or you can craft them just like you normally would. But the 63 new cards and all the cards that are part of the Alchemy set or the Alchemy format only, you will only be able to get those cards out of Alchemy boosters. Like if you buy a standard booster, you won't get one of these new cards we're going to preview. And then, so how do you tell if a card is the rebalanced Alchemy version or the standard version? Well, what they're going to do is they're going to put a little symbol up in the corner, and it's going to have this little orange Alchemy symbol so that you can tell what version it is. And then what if I've already collected cards that have been rebalanced for play in Alchemy? Well, if you've already collected cards that will have an Alchemy version, you should automatically see both that are in your collection, right? You will not need to recollect these cards. And this will also apply to future Alchemy balance changes. And what they don't cover here is something that's very important. We'll get to that in the bad, but yeah. Okay, moving on. How does duplicate protection work with Alchemy boosters? Well, they're going to use a modified version. When opening an Alchemy booster, it's going to prioritize the new to digital magic cards created for the current Alchemy set. So if you've collected playsets of all the new Alchemy cards from the current set, you will instead receive cards of the same rarity from the adjacent standard set. Hopefully that makes sense to you. If you are set complete, which basically none of us are, for both Alchemy and the adjacent standard set, normal duplicate protection rules apply, right? And then it says here, as a reminder, when you craft or open a booster containing a card rebalance for Alchemy, you will receive both the standard and the Alchemy version of the set. I know I went over that, but I just want to reiterate it, right? You're not going to have to worry about creating duplicates. However, there are some other implications. Also, we'll get to that later. And then, like I said, it's going to be balanced pretty much every single month. All right, let's move on to the good stuff. Okay, let's talk about why I think Alchemy is good before we get to the bad. So, I think more cards is always good. So 4 to 6 weeks after a set comes out, they release another mini set, and it's not like it's 5 cards or 10 cards. It's 63 cards. That is a fairly substantial amount. And between that and rebalancing, this means that the meta is going to change quite a bit, and it's going to change far more frequently than it has up until this point. And that's going to be a very good thing. More cards are always good. I love brewing decks, and I think that's why most people love Magic. They love that magical feeling. Okay. They love that feeling of having a chance to create something that's special, something that hasn't been found yet or is not widely known yet. And when you played paper Magic back in the day, and I've been playing since almost the very beginning, just after the dark, and my cousin actually started in the dark. He had a bunch of dark cards. Dave, if you're watching this video, shout out, buddy. And so when it was paper Magic, things didn't get discovered nearly as quickly, right? It just wasn't the same level of discovery as Arena, where people get to play a drastically higher amount of games in a very short period. And when you do that, people just iterate off each other, and they build off each other, and they solve it as a community. And it happens so fast that it gets boring. So, you know, We need new cards is what I'm saying. That's what I'm driving at. New cards is always good. And because of that, you will have more of a sense of that discovery of that, brewing something that's really unique and really cool that, other people haven't really done yet. And then we have digital only cards now, right? And we'll talk about why that's bad. But the reason that's good is that they have more flexibility to create mechanics that they couldn't replicate in paper. You just couldn't keep track of them. You'll see when I get there, these mechanics are impossible to deal with in paper Magic, or they would make the game so onerous, the bookkeeping so onerous that you just wouldn't even want to do it. You'd be like, I don't want to play this. Like it wouldn't work. So we've got mechanics that are extremely innovative and can do a lot more than paper mechanics can. Not more, but more variety, let's say. Oh, I just smashed my mic. Sorry about that. More variety, right? And I think that's a good thing. Having more mechanics means more complexity. It means it's harder to solve, and it means more variety, and variety, the spice of life, and you know it. Okay, so because we have more cards, because of what I just all said, we've got more diversity. More diversity keeps things fresh. And, and we'll talk about this later, but I think the majority of the player base will enjoy more deck diversity. It just feels that way to me. That's my personal opinion. Make sure you comment. Let me know what you think. Because standard, it's getting stale for a lot of people. Like, I can tell you, I get pretty sick of running up against the same decks all the time, especially as you get higher, like into Mythic and stuff. And even in Diamond and Platinum, you just run into the same decks over and over again. There's a bunch of reasons for that. That's not for this video, but standard gets stale. And so all these, new cards and new mechanics and rebalancing keeps everything super fresh. And why is it also good? Because let's say, and Wizards of the Coast, they're doing very well. Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, whatever. Arena has been huge for them. I was just watching this video with the president, Chris Cox, talking about how huge their quarter was. I can't remember exactly when the video is from, but it's fairly recent. And it was talking about, profits of plus 30% this quarter versus last year, etc. But when you're a corporation, you need to continue down that road. Like, think about Blockbuster, and this is what I was talking about before. Blockbuster didn't adjust, right? They didn't adjust to the changing times. Like, I was watching this, I think it was a documentary or something where they had like an interview with like an executive or something, or they had notes from meetings or something along those lines where Blockbuster's like, we really think that people enjoy the experience of coming into the store and bonding and browsing through movies and stuff like that. And it was like, no, that was 100% wrong. I don't know if they were like interviewing or sampling from people like 80 plus or something at the time, right? Like really old people who just had nothing to do with computers, the internet, or any sort of technology. But they were 100% wrong. And this move helps them into the future, because the future is a digital age. Yes, some things are still doing quite well that are physical, like board games. I also have a board game YouTube channel. I play a lot of board games. I'm really into games like Gloomhaven and, different things like that, Dungeons and Dragons and all that kind of good fantasy, sci-fi, board game, role-playing stuff. That's the kind of stuff I've always been into. So some things are doing good in a physical medium, but overall, the world is moving to a digital medium, right? And this is a move towards the future for them. It is. Magic the Gathering Arena is super profitable. They want to cash in like Hearthstone has. They want to be the leading digital card game in the world. And these are the kinds of things they will need to do that. So why is that good? Why is just this corporation who makes money hand over fist making more money good? Well, if they go the way of Blockbuster, we don't have Magic in the same way anymore. And even though I know there's a lot of outrage right now, Digital Magic is good for the game overall. And I'll talk about, yeah, I've got a hot take, like I said. We'll talk about that at the end in my final thoughts. I don't want to get too far into that right now. And here's another good thing. The majority wants this. I am positive that the majority wants this. We're going to go through all the Reddit comments in a little bit, but I believe the majority wants this because it will create more excitement. Okay, so let's talk about what is bad about Alchemy. Well, the first thing that came to mind for me is the cost. And that's what came to mind for a lot of people. So we've got 63 more cards. We've got all these extra rare and mythic wild cards that we're going to need to craft. So as you add more cards, the cost goes up. And I think that's a valid concern. However, to me, I still think the variety trumps the cost. And when we add new sets anyways, we add cost, right? So I get it. And yes, that is a definite negative. It is going to increase the cost. And Wizards had an opportunity. They had an opportunity to come up with some sort of system that would reward players when their favorite cards got nerfed, right? So let's talk about the cost. So first, more cards, more stuff to craft, more cost, but also potentially more cost. And yeah, okay, I'm going to go through it first because I have a lot to say on this. So you build a deck. You are mostly a free-to-play player. You build a deck, you spend your hard-earned wild cards on a card. Next week, it gets nerfed, right? As at this point in time, Wizards is not going to give you a wild card for any nerfs or buffs in Alchemy. If a card gets banned in Standard, you will get wild cards as compensation though. And there still is Standard, right? So I think a lot of people keep forgetting this. They are forgetting that Standard is still there. You can go play regular Standard to your heart's content. It still will be there. Alchemy is completely separate. However, I think what's happening is that Alchemy and Historic are tied. Historic is going to have digital only cards too. And you're not going to get compensated. You're not going to be compensated when things get changed for the negative. However, what people don't think of, they just go into this shell of, oh my God, change. I hate change. I don't want things to go bad. And they start catastrophizing what's going to happen. But on the flip side, you may have wild cards that you just collected that you've never used because they suck, right? And then all of a sudden they get a buff and you've got all these cards that you can craft a deck out of for free. So there is two sides to that coin. And I really think that it's probably fairly close to even, but the human psyche focuses on the negative. You know, it's so much harder when something is taken away from you than given to you. Like, it's just so much harder on your psyche. There's studies on that where taking something away is just, yeah, your brain just remembers it in a different way. And I think that's what's happening to a lot of people. So let's move on. There is increased cost, and you may potentially run into the problem of you build a deck and the cards get nerfed. However, based upon the nerfs and buffs I've seen, I don't think that is a massive concern, because the nerfs and buffs they've done have actually been fairly creative, I think, and they're not just like axing a card and destroying it. Okay, next, the paper magic world is going to be separating from the digital. And I think there's some, oh, I'm leaning too far away from my mic. I'm contemplating, so I'm leaning into my contemplative mode. I think that dividing paper magic from digital is a little bit scary. It's a bit scary to me. I don't really want them to be super separate, because I think it's really cool to be able to play digital magic and then transfer a lot of that experience and that knowledge over to paper, to build your decks, to understand which cards synergize, and just overall, I think that it's really nice to have them somewhat similar, but this is going to divide paper from digital. It is. And the gap will just keep widening. At some point, there'll be, you know, like Alchemy will be too different from paper to translate. Like, you know, there'll be so many different cards. And what I think, you know, could happen to players who play a reasonable amount of both is that it becomes very confusing when you're formulating decks, right? You think, okay, here's a good idea. I'm going to use this card. It's going to synergize with this card. And then you go and you build the deck and you're like, oh, that's not actually how it works. I was remembering the digital version and the card is not like that. So I've wasted all this time. And when you're building paper decks, man, it takes a while compared to on Arena, right? Like you're digging through stacks of cards. Even if you're ultra organized, it takes way more times, right? Or it takes way more time. Then the last kind of point I wanted to make is that I think, I don't know exactly how it's going to go. We'll talk about my opinion later, but if let's say the player base is half in standard and half in Alchemy, right? Just talking best of one here. Half standard best of one, half Alchemy best of one. I think match times could be a little bit worse. There could be some implications around how matches are made. Maybe that's actually a good thing though. Maybe if there's less opportunity for the matchmaker to select, you know, a certain type of deck to face against you or something, it may be good, but times may increase. Okay, let's talk about some Reddit comments. First, let's read this one. They apparently still don't want you playing anything non-standard, so they are doing this to destroy every other format. Yes, that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing. They only want you to play standard. Why do they want you to do that? Because they're just evil. They're evil, crazy people that only want you to play standard for some arbitrary reason that nobody understands. No, they want you to play standard because that's what most people want to play. It's the most popular format. Wizards of the Coast is not just making things up and doing random things. They are going with what people want or what they perceive people want. And on Reddit, it's so hilarious because you see, you know, 200 comments on this thread or whatever, right? Let's see here. There's 1,100 comments on this particular thread. I was looking at another one that was a couple hundred. So they've got, you know, 1,100 comments on here from, you know, let's say 300 or 400 people, because a lot of people are going back and forth in this thread. These are the vocal minority. These are the vocal minority. I mean, these are people who want everything to be the same. Most people will just, they won't come to Reddit. They may not even know this is happening, right? People who are watching videos that I make and people who are going on Reddit are the exception, not the norm. Most people, they like Magic. They played it some in their life. They play in and out. Sometimes they play, sometimes they don't. They're not super competitive about it. They go into Arena, they play when they want, when they have time, and they're not, you know, up in arms about everything. Here's another one. Now let's be reasonable. We can't be sure why they made this decision. All the dollar signs in there. And it's like, yeah, of course they're making those decisions. It feels like a lot of people don't have an understanding about how the corporate world works. And yes, the corporate world sucks. It does. That's where I came from. That's where I came from. I was a corporate director, a national director, you know, on my way to a vice presidency when I decided I wanted to do something differently. And people just have very little understanding of how these places work. And of course they have to make money. If they don't make money, then they're not around and we don't have Magic. And I get it. It feels like one of those things that's just a money play. And it probably is, but that's the reality of how it works. They have to continue to make money. If they don't change things, then it stays the same, it stagnates, and it dies. Again, back to Blockbuster. They didn't see the writing on the wall. They didn't adjust in time. All of these companies are constantly trying to stay ahead of the curve, trying to stay on top of how the world is evolving. Like take Facebook. Facebook just turned into Meta. I think it's a super stupid name. But if you go look at Facebook's numbers, it's like, I don't know, when did it come out? 2006, 2007. You know, it skyrockets until like 2012, 2013, 2014. And then like now, like I was looking at some numbers back in 2012 or 2013, it was like 90 something percent of teenagers had Facebook. Now it's like 20%. And Facebook is considered a boomer site, right? And so they're trying to keep up. And that's what Wizards is trying to do. You can't look at it like, oh, they're just this evil corporation that's trying to suck every cent out of us. Yes, they are trying to suck every cent out of you. Though that's their job. But they're also trying to do that. The way they're trying to do that is by appealing to the most amount of people. So these changes that they're making, they believe that this will appeal to the majority. They believe that the majority of players feel like it's better if the game stays fresher and that there's more variety, right? Here's another funny one. I feel like this is about a sense of pride and accomplishment. Just so snide. Okay, here's another one. Actually ridiculous. They can straight up nerf your cards, and since they aren't being banned, you don't get wild cards. What a scam. Yeah, but how can they? It's so much more complicated than that, right? What if they make the tiniest little nerf? Like Luminarch has a fairly small nerf. We'll get into that here shortly. Luminarch Aspirant has a fairly small nerf. Should you get compensated for that when it only makes a slight difference? What if it makes a 5% difference in playability? And then, you know, there's a sliding curve. What if it makes an 80% chance in difference in playability, right? It's very hard to manage those things. I feel like they don't necessarily, I'm leaning back again because it's like my contemplative pose. I feel, oh, my camera's going out too because of that, the focus. I feel, okay, so it's a complicated situation, right? I feel like they needed to do something and they still need to do something to compensate people, right? They need to like give out a reward regardless when it happens. So let's say every month somebody gets a couple wild cards or something like that, or you have a chance to get a wild card. They can't give a wild card for every single little change because that de-incentivizes them to make small tweaks that could actually change the meta and change the game for the better. So if you make a super small change to Luminarch Aspirant and everybody gets wild cards, it crushes their economy, right? It crashes, it could cause catastrophic things for the economy. And it's not that simple. So they have to be very careful. And if every little change gets you a wild card, then they don't make all those little changes and we're back to being stale. Giving them the freedom to make a ton of small little changes is actually much better for us because it provides more diversity. So what they need to do is they need to come up with another way to reward players that is a small reward, right? Like maybe if every time 5-year cards get changed, you get a rare wild card or something like that. I'm just making things up. I don't know what the solution is, but I think the Reddit outrage is the vocal minority and that, yeah, it's not nearly as bad as it appears. So if you've been reading Reddit thinking the sky is falling, I don't think the sky is falling. And I think, I don't want to say it yet. Hold on, we'll get there. Okay, let's talk some of the rebalances. So let's start with the devil. The devil, everyone's most hated card, except for all the people that are playing it. Alrund's Epiphany. So now the text reads, take an extra turn after this one. If this spell was foretold, create 2 1/1 blue bird creature tokens with flying. Exile Alrund's Epiphany. No more, 8 mana cost galvanic iteration to a foretold Epiphany, creating multiple birds because the copy's not going to be foretold. So when they copy now, they don't get nearly as many birds, and they need those birds to finish you off most of the time. So this is a huge change, and I think it will completely change how the card is played. It will still be good in some applications, but the galvanic one to infinite turns, I don't think is going to happen anymore. Hullbreaker is going to be a superior card now to that strategy, right? Hullbreaker is going to be able to destroy Alrund's Epiphany. The next we've got is Asika's Chariot. And now we've got, when Asika's Chariot enters the battlefield, create a 2/2 Greed Cat creature token. So only one token instead of 2 tokens, but now it's got accrue 2. Why did they do this? They wanted to make it easier for single removal spells to interact with Asika's Chariot. The 2 creatures for forecasting cost plus the Chariot was just generating too much value against like one for one removal spells. And because Asika's Chariot dodges, you know, all of like the sweepers, the full on sweeper removal, it needs to be a little bit weaker to one-on-one removal. Next change we have is Faceless Haven, everybody's favorite man land. It's just becoming a 3/3 now instead of a 4/3, which means you have a lot more creatures that can block it without dying. Like, you know, now you know, if you're facing off against mono white, Adeline can block it. You know, a Chariot can block it instead. A Cemetery Prowler can block it. A Lear can block it. It makes a huge change. Still a very good card. And then Goldspan Dragon. So everything is the same except they've removed or becomes the target of a spell. So the problem with this is against control decks who are playing Goldspan Dragon, they attack you and, you know, they get 2 mana. Then you target it with a spell. They've got 4 mana up now with 2 treasures to deal with whatever you've got, right? And it just made it too ridiculous to deal with. So now when you play the dragon, you only get 1 treasure when it attacks, and that is going to make a big difference in how it plays. Okay, now we're getting to Luminarch, which I was talking about before. Luminarch is at the beginning of your end step. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So a fairly small change. Still, I think a very strong card. It does not destroy the card. They just wanted to tone down the immediate impact, right? You play a turn 1 drop, turn 2, you get to pump up that drop, right? And it, you know, makes a fairly big difference, being able to add that +1/+1. So the card has been nerfed, but not nerfed into the ground. I still think adding a counter every single turn for no cost is very strong. Then we have Omnath, Locus of Creation. This card is going to be unbanned, I believe. I think it's banned, right? So it's going to be unbanned in Alchemy. And they've increased the cost by 1 colorless. And you scry 1 when entering the battlefield instead of drawing a card. I still think it's a very, very strong card and you'll be able to build decks around it. But I mean, that does slow it down quite a bit. And then we've got Cosmos Elixir. Now it's gain 2 life and scry 1 if you don't draw the card. I actually like this card. I think it's fun. I think it did need a buff though. It's an okay card, but only in very specific decks. And then we've got the Demilict. It goes from 4/3 to 4/4. And so this is going to make it much more resistant to red removal, right? No longer do you get to frostbite it or, you know, do 3 damage with a Royal Eruption, stuff like that. It just makes it so much more reliable to build a deck around. Is it still amazing? Probably not. But if we can just tweak things to, you know, increase the viability of decks, it's going to be so huge for the game. And it's going to be good pretty much for everybody. Next is Druid class. The level 3 costs 2 in a green instead of 4 in a green. Clearly much better. Like 5 mana for this was useless. Now it's semi-useful. And then we've got Wizard class. You have no maximum hand size. And then essentially they just took the level 3 down by 2 generic mana. And so now to get to level 3, it only costs you 3 total mana. Still don't know if it's there, but maybe it helps. Maybe it helps a little bit, right? Then we've got Phylath, World Sculptor. Now it has Trample, And the landfall trigger is it gains trample until end of turn, which makes it way better. This card was way too slow and not strong enough. It should really probably be like a 6/6 or a 7/7 as well, if it actually wants to see any play, or it needs to go down in mana. So those are the first set of balances. I like them. I don't know. I think they're being fairly conservative in the beginning. I really like the Goldspan one because Goldspan is just too ridiculous. You can just put it in any deck at all times and make the deck better. And really, for Magic to be the best game it can be, decks should be relying on synergy. That's the funnest part, is finding synergy, brewing up cool stuff that works together. Okay, let's talk about our first new card, digital only, Captain Eberhardt. 1/1, double strike, spells cast from among cards you drew this turn cost 1 less to cast. Spells cast from among cards your opponents drew this turn cost 1 more to cast. And I've seen a lot of back and forth about this card. I watched Saffron Olive's video from MTG Goldfish. I watched Covert Blue's video, and I've done a bunch of research online. I think a lot of people are missing the value of this card. Is it better than Thalia, Guardian of Thraben? I don't know, but I think it's very close, and here's why. So let's think about a turn 3 play, right? Let's say you pull an Elite Spellbinder. There's so many in mono white right now. You've got Adeline for turn 3. You've got Elite Spellbinder for turn 3. You've got Skyclave Apparition. You've got Brutal Cathar. You've got, what's the other one? Redain, right? All of those cards are turn 3 plays. On turn 3 now, if you pull one of those cards, you get to play it, and you get to play another one of your 1-drops on turn 3. That's going to allow you to curve out so hard. Let's say you pull an Elite Spellbinder on turn 3 after you play this. You play it, you play out Stonebinder's Familiar, and you play your Elite Spellbinder. Now you've got a 2/2 Stonebinder's Familiar on top of your Elite Spellbinder on turn 3. That is huge. 2 extra power on turn 3. And you're also slowing your opponents down. So if you get into a situation where they are top decking or they are fairly low on cards and they're looking for an answer to all of your creatures, they top deck that. They need 1 extra mana to cast it. And I think it's actually going to make a huge difference. I think people are sleeping on this card. I think it's amazing. We'll see. Okay, Absorb Energy. Counter target spell. Cards in your hand that share a card type with that spell perpetually gain this spell cost 1 less to cast. Another card where I don't think people are seeing the value of this. Yeah, Leer is around, and that means you can't counter spells, but in a lot of cases, this functionally costs you 0 mana in the right decks, right? You counter an instant and you're running a bunch of instants, then you get, 3-4 mana potentially extra. Could be really huge for control decks that have a lot of instants to stay on top of, creature decks and make sure that, the creatures are getting bounced back into their hand into the royal. Or Divide by 0 now only costs 2 if it's in your hand. A 2 casting cost Divide by 0 is flipping huge. I think this card is pretty darn good. The next card here we have is Geist Channeler. 2 mana, 1/3. When Geist Channeler enters the battlefield, choose an instant or sorcery card in your hand with mana value 3 or greater. It perpetually gains this spell cost 2 less to cast. And just think, I don't know if this applies to Flashback, but just think if you could actually play this card and get it out of your graveyard more than once, you could have a really cheap 5 mana spell that could be pretty insane. Like, think about something like Lorehold Command at 3 mana, or Doomscar at 3 mana without having to foretell it. It saves you a lot of time, right? You get to play a creature out to chump block and keep your life total high. This would be like in a control deck, right? You get a 1/3, which is an annoying body, even for 2 mana. 1/3 is kind of annoying. But I think in a control deck, if you get it out and you chump block with it, and then you manage to pump up your board wipe or something, or reduce the cost, so you can cast it earlier without having to spell your foretell mana. I think a 1/3, like even just Doomscar, right? Instead of spending 2 and foretelling Doomscar and then casting it for 3, so total cost of 5, you get a 1/3 body and you get to do that. So you potentially prevent a reasonable amount of damage as well. I think there's a lot of things that can be done with this card. It could potentially be game changing for some decks. Next card we have is Patient Zero. One of the flashiest cards, I would say, just because it's such a different mechanic. So 2/2 lifelink, damage isn't removed from creatures your opponents control during cleanup steps. So essentially what this means is, you know, a 4/4, it has 4 total life as long as this thing is on the field from turn to turn. So you attack once with a 2/2, they jump block. Now it's a 4/2. Next turn you attack with a 2/2, their creature dies. As long as you can keep Patient Zero out. And that's going to be the hard part, right? People just wait, then they kill it, and it has very little effect. And it doesn't affect the game right away. So this is super flashy, and it could potentially be good, but I don't know if this is actually good. Just because, I mean, it's going to be just the #1 target to remove, and maybe that helps you sometimes, but it doesn't have an immediate effect on the game. Next, Toralf's Disciple, 3 cost, haste, 3/3. Whenever Toralf's Disciple attacks, conjure 4 cards named Lightning Bolt into your library, then shuffle. Lightning Bolt is back in standard. I love this card, like I do. I don't know if it's good though. Like really, it doesn't have a great impact. A 3/3 with haste is not really strong in standard. It's fairly mediocre, you know. Only in certain decks could it even be considered. And this makes it pretty narrow, right? Essentially, you need a burn deck. Because if you don't have a burn deck, the lightning bolts, you know, you're not actually going to want them, right? Like, how do these lightning bolts synergize with your deck's plan already? There's some stuff that could be out there, but I love the mechanic. I think it's so amazing. And this is why this is a digital only card too. This stuff would be so flippin' hard to take care of in Paper Magic. Next, we've got Ishkana Broodmother. Reach, other spiders you control get +1/+2. And then her ability, exile. So for 1 and a black or a green, exile 2 cards from your graveyard. Draft a card from Ishkana Broodmother's spellbook. Hopefully I can go find this list. I've seen the list on other videos. Basically, it's a bunch of sucky spiders. And there's only 1 removal spell. I think it's Prey Upon. So the spellbook kind of sucks. It does create card advantage for you, but the spells in like her spellbook are actually not very good. Hopefully I'm going to have this graphic up. If not, I apologize. You can go find it out there. Hopefully somewhere. It's definitely on Covert Go Blue's video, and it's on Saffron Olive's video. Next, we've got Begin Anew. 2 green, 2 white. Destroy all creatures. Creature cards in your hand perpetually get +1. I have no idea what to think about this one, except for a 4 mana board wipe is very good. I mean, right there, even though the colors are weird, you're going to have to really work in those colors because those are very creature focused colors, which is why they've done this. They're trying to create something more interesting. And then the ability, creature cards in your hand perpetually get +1/+1. It's kind of at odds with what you do. So I'm curious as to what you think. What would you use this card for? Next, we've got one of my faves here, Gitrog Horror of Zava, 2 and black and a green, so 4 total. Menace, 6/6. At the beginning of each combat, if Gitrog Horror of Zava is untapped, any opponent may sacrifice a creature. If they do, tap it, then seek a land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Seek is you go directly into the library and you randomly get one. Another thing that would be very difficult to do live. So you don't get to choose which land it is. Arena's just randomly going to shove a land out. Still very good. And then whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, it perpetually gains black and a green, sacrifices land, draw a card. So some very cool card advantage. Pretty strong body with Menace at 4 mana cost at 6/6, right? So I think this card's actually going to be really good. Some cool combos that can come from this, and you're going to be able to put a lot of pressure on your opponent because of how low the casting cost is. I mean, easy easy to get this turn 3 pretty much all the time with, you know, a Prosperous Innkeeper, a Shambling Ghast, a Deadly Dispute. I mean, there's so many flipping ways, right? Ominous Travelers are next. When Ominous Traveler enters the battlefield, draft a card from Ominous Traveler's spellbook. That card perpetually gains. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast this spell. And when you cast this spell, you return a creature card named Ominous Traveler you control to its owner's hand. So essentially you're going into a spellbook. It's got a bunch of tribal stuff. Hopefully I'm going to show it here. It's got werewolves, spirits, vampires, and zombies. And it could be okay. It's definitely generating card advantage, but it's so random. So like, what other cards do you play with this? Because it has 4 tribes in it. If you play one of the tribes, you may just get zombies and you've got werewolves and it doesn't do anything for you. Like, take the Horseman, right? You get the Horseman, you don't have any other zombies. It's practically useless. It goes from being an amazing card in a zombie deck to a complete dud, basically, in any other deck. And what you're doing when you're going into these spellbooks is you're getting 3 cards randomly, and then you choose from one of those 3 cards. So probably the randomness makes this bad. I don't know. I don't see it. Let me know what you think. Next, we've got Forsaken Crossroads. This one's really cool. When it enters the battlefield, it enters tapped. And as Forsaken Crossroads enters the battlefield, choose a color. So any mana color. When Forsaken Crossroads enters the battlefield, scry 1. Good. If you weren't the starting player, you may untap Forsaken Crossroads instead. So this gives you a little bonus when you're on the draw, because being on the draw sucks. It is a massive disadvantage. And sometimes you get stuck on the draw a lot and it just like ruins your day. Especially like you're on the draw and you have a little bit of like bad mana problems or something. You can just get wrecked game after game after game, no matter how good you play. And I think they're trying to address some of that. I love the mechanic. I don't know if it's enough. Maybe they could do a little bit more. I think you should still be able to scry, right? Not you may, yeah, instead. It says here instead, right? You may untap Forsaken Crossroads instead. I think that means you don't scry. Hopefully I'm wrong. Let me know what you think. Okay, that's it for the new cards. Comment below. I'm really excited for some of these cards. I think they're quite fun. Some of them are a little bit all over the place, but we'll see how it plays out. All right. So we've come almost to the end, and I'm going to give you my honest opinion, my hot take on this. Nothing will ever be the same again for MTG Arena. This is going to become the preferred format. I'm confident. Why? Well, I think I've explained it fairly well, but I'll just quickly go over again. Staleness wrecks the game. Boredom wrecks the game. Digital, because it's so fast and so many games get played so quickly, and because of the internet and because people want to win, like, it's so tough when you go out there. If you don't net deck, you better be a damn good deck builder, and you better have, you know, a very good understanding. And most people don't have time for that. Most people have jobs and they play Magic for fun. So what happens is you go out, you don't net deck, you get your ass handed to you over and over again. You go and you net deck, and then the meta evolves so quickly that it becomes stale quickly, because there's only so many cards that can be used. And, you know, people are smart, right? There's, you know, millions of us looking at this stuff and solving it very quickly. When you have something that stays fresh, I'm cranking into my mic again. When you have something that stays fresh, it stays interesting. When it stays interesting, more people play. This will attract more people. Reddit is the vocal minority. It's the people who are very set in their ways and who love to talk about how they feel. And that's not a shot to any of you Reddit people who have commented. It's just the way it is. You're the vocal minority. Most people, they don't say anything. You know, I get 100 views on a video. Every 100 views, I get 1 comment maybe, right? 99 people just watch it and they don't do anything. They just watch the video and they go about their lives. And that's kind of the same with everything else too. Most people just absorb the information and they go on with their lives. So the sky is not falling. Alchemy is not going to ruin the world. More people are going to come to Magic Arena to play this because people are going to have more fun in Alchemy. And soon it will be the #1 format. I think most streamers are going to end up there. So here's what I need from you. I need you to comment and let me know how you feel, what your thoughts are, anything you have that is relevant to this discussion. I want to hear from you because I think it's very interesting what people think, and that's why I've been scouring Reddit threads like a crazy person all last night and this morning, just trying to get a read on things. But Reddit, again, it's the vocal minority. This is the future of Magic. Nothing is going to be the same ever again after this when it comes to Magic. And I know that's really hard for some people, but I think that the future is bright. I think this is a good thing. And yes, it may cost a little bit more money, but you must evolve in this world. The digital age, things change so quickly. People have such short attention spans. If they get bored, they don't play Magic. If nobody plays Magic, the game completely dies. So Wizards has to evolve. I think this is a great evolution, and I'll probably be making content on it unless it doesn't work well. So, you know, you tell me, if I put out Alchemy content, will you watch it? And if you made it this far, you're a flippin' legend, by the way. Thanks so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And watch for my next video. I'm going to be doing, maybe not right away, there's maybe a couple videos away, but I'm going to be doing a budget deck grind to Mythic. I'm going to show you all how synergy comes together with a budget deck, and I'm going straight to Mythic with it, baby. All right, talk to you next time.